1. The Whispers of the Cornfield. The small town of Elmsworth was known for its vast cornfields, stretching as far as the eye could see. But there was one particular field that stood out, not for its beauty or its yield, but for the chilling tales that surrounded it. Locals called it the Whispering Field, and no one dared to venture there after sunset. One summer evening, a group of 5 teenagers, fueled by a mix of boredom and bravado, decided to challenge the legends. They dared each other to spend a night in the Whispering Field, with the last person remaining by sunrise winning a pot of money they had all contributed to. As they entered the field, the sun was setting, casting long, eerie shadows between the rows of corn. The world outside seemed to fade away, replaced by the rustling of the corn and the chirping of the crickets. They laughed and joked, trying to mask their growing unease. Hours passed, and the moon rose high in the sky. That's when they first heard it, a faint whisper, like someone calling out from a distance. They dismissed it as the wind or their imagination. But then, another whisper followed, this time closer and clearer. Leave, leave now. The group huddled together, their bravado replaced by genuine fear. They tried to convince themselves that it was a prank by one of the townsfolks. But then, one of the teens, Jake, pointed to a spot deeper in the field. Do you see that? He whispered. There, amidst the corn, was a faint glow, moving slowly towards them. Panicking, the group decided to split up, thinking it would be harder for whoever or whatever was out there to catch them. They agreed to meet at the edge of the field by dawn. But as the night wore on, the whispers grew louder and more insistent. Each teen felt as if they were being watched, hunted. One by one, their flashlights went out, leaving them in complete darkness. By the time the first rays of sunlight began to pierce the horizon, only one of them, Lily, had made it to the edge of the field. Breathless and terrified, she looked back and saw no sign of her friends. She ran to the nearest house and called the police. The search for the missing teenagers began immediately. The police combed every inch of the Whispering Field, but found no trace of them. However, in the very center of the field, they made a chilling discovery. Old, weathered gravestones, some dating back over a century. The inscriptions were faded, but one thing was clear. The field had once been a burial ground. The town was in shock. The legend of the Whispering Field had turned out to be true. The spirits of those buried there did not take kindly to intruders, especially those who dared to mock them. Lily never recovered from that night. She moved away from Elmsworth and tried to start a new life, but the whispers always followed her. Every night, as she tried to sleep, she would hear them, reminding her of the friends she lost and the price they paid for their curiosity. The Whispering Field remains untouched to this day. The corn grows tall and wild, and no one dares to enter, especially after sunset. And on quiet nights, if you listen closely, you can still hear the faint whispers, a chilling reminder of the field's dark past. 2. The Scarecrow's secret. The town of Harrowsfield was picturesque, with its rolling hills, quaint houses, and expansive farmlands. But amidst its beauty lay a chilling mystery. Every year, as autumn approached, Farmer Thompson would erect a new scarecrow in his cornfield. And every year, around the same time, a resident of Harrowsfield would vanish without a trace. The townspeople whispered among themselves, drawing connections between the two events. But no one dared to confront Farmer Thompson directly. After all, he was a reclusive man, known for his short temper and cold demeanor. One evening, a young man named Eli, driven by a mix of curiosity and the pain of losing his younger sister the previous year, decided to investigate. He waited until nightfall and then stealthily made his way to Farmer Thompson's property. The moonlight cast an eerie glow over the cornfield, making the scarecrow's silhouettes appear even more sinister. As Eli moved closer, he noticed something peculiar about the newest scarecrow. Its clothes looked familiar. They were the same as those worn by Mrs. Patterson, the town librarian who had disappeared just a week prior. Suddenly, a soft moan echoed through the still night air. Eli froze, his heart racing. He followed the sound and stumbled upon a horrifying sight. Farmer Thompson, illuminated by the dim light of a lantern, was in the process of turning one of the townspeople into a scarecrow. The victim was bound, gagged, and paralyzed by some concoction, but still alive, their eyes wide with terror. Eli, driven by a surge of adrenaline, lunged at Farmer Thompson, knocking the old man to the ground. The two struggled, but Eli managed to overpower the farmer and tie him up using the very ropes meant for his next victim. The authorities were alerted, and a thorough investigation of the property began. To the town's horror, each scarecrow was found to be a preserved body of the missing townspeople, their insides hollowed out and replaced with straw. Farmer Thompson was arrested, and the truth of his heinous acts came to light. He believed that the scarecrows, imbued with human souls, would protect his crops from any harm, ensuring a bountiful harvest year after year. The town of Harrowsfield was forever scared by the revelation. The cornfield was cleared, and a memorial was erected in honor of the victims. As for the scarecrows, they were given proper burials, their souls finally at rest. Eli was hailed as a hero, but the trauma of that night haunted him. He often wondered how many times he had walked past those scarecrows, never realizing the dark secret they held. The event served as a grim reminder to the townspeople that sometimes the most horrifying monsters are not those of legends but the ones that live among us. The lost children of the maze. Every October, the town of Labyrinthine transformed one of its vast cornfields into a sprawling maze for Halloween festivities. It was a tradition that drew visitors from neighboring towns, eager to test their wits against the labyrinth. But for the locals, the maze held a darker significance. Every year, a child would enter the maze and never come out. Rumors spread of a curse, of children's laughter echoing through the maze long after sunset, of ghostly apparitions seen wandering its paths. But most dismissed these tales as mere urban legends, meant to add a thrill to the Halloween experience. That was until Amelia, an investigative journalist, arrived in Labyrinthine. Intrigued by the stories and skeptical of the supernatural claims, she decided to spend a night in the maze, hoping to debunk the myths once and for all. As dusk settled, Amelia entered the maze, armed with a flashlight and a camera. The tall cornstalks seemed to close in around her, and the once familiar paths became disorienting. Hours passed, and Amelia began to feel an unsettling sensation of being watched. Suddenly, a soft giggle echoed through the stillness. Following the sound, Amelia stumbled upon a clearing where she saw the translucent figures of children, playing and laughing. They looked up, their eyes hollow and sad, and beckoned her to join them. Terrified, Amelia tried to retrace her steps, but the paths of the maze shifted and changed, trapping her within its confines. The ghostly children followed, their voices pleading, "Stay with us. Play with us." Desperate to escape, Amelia remembered an old rhyme she had heard about the maze. To break the witch's binding spell, find the heart and all will be well. Realizing that the heart referred to the center of the maze, Amelia pushed forward, the ghostly children's whispers growing louder with each step. Finally, she reached the heart of the maze and found an ancient stone altar. Upon it lay a locket, pulsating with a strange energy. Amelia, driven by instinct, opened the locket. A blinding light enveloped the maze, and the ghostly children's figures began to shimmer and fade. One by one, they smiled at Amelia, gratitude in their eyes, before disappearing into the ether. As dawn broke, Amelia found herself standing at the entrance of the maze, the locket still clutched in her hand. The townspeople, who had been searching for her all night, were overjoyed to see her safe. The locket, as it turned out, belonged to a witch who had once lived in Labyrinthine. Jealous of the town's happiness, she had cursed the maze, trapping the souls of the children within it. By opening the locket, Amelia had broken the curse and set the spirits free. The maze was dismantled, and in its place, a memorial garden was planted, dedicated to the lost children. Every year, on the anniversary of that fateful night, the townspeople would gather there, lighting lanterns in remembrance. Amelia's experience in the maze changed her. She left her job as a journalist and settled in Labyrinthine, dedicating her life to preserving the town's history and ensuring that the stories of the lost children were never forgotten. 4. The Midnight Harvest. The Carter family was elated when they moved into their new farmhouse, nestled amidst acres of fertile land. The vast cornfield that came with the property was a sight to behold, with golden stalks swaying gently in the breeze. But as the days turned into nights, the family began to notice something peculiar. Every night, precisely at midnight, the distant hum of machinery would break the stillness. Peering out of their windows, the Carters would see lights flickering deep within the cornfield, moving methodically, as if someone was harvesting the crops. Intrigued and a tad alarmed, Mr. Carter decided to investigate. One night, he ventured into the field, following the sounds and lights. To his astonishment, he came upon ghostly figures operating old-fashioned farming equipment, their translucent hands skillfully cutting and collecting corn. As Mr. Carter watched in awe, an elderly specter approached him. The ghost introduced himself as Samuel, the original owner of the farmhouse. He explained that he and his family had tragically died in a barn fire decades ago. Their spirits, still deeply attached to the land they had cultivated, returned every night to continue their harvest. Moved by the tale, Mr. Carter approached the town's historian, Mrs. Whitmore, to learn more. She confirmed Samuel's story, adding that the fire had been set by a rival farmer, envious of Samuel's bountiful crops. The spirits, bound by the trauma of their untimely deaths, were trapped in an endless cycle of midnight harvests. Determined to help, the Carter family, with Mrs. Whitmore's guidance, decided to hold a séance. They invited the spirits of Samuel and his family into their home, offering them a chance to communicate and find closure. As the candles flickered and the wind howled outside, Samuel's voice echoed through the room. He spoke of his love for the land and his sorrow at being separated from it. He expressed a longing for peace and a release from the endless toil. Mrs. Whitmore, well-versed in rituals, suggested a solution. She advised the Carters to plant a tree in the center of the cornfield, a symbol of life and renewal. This tree, she believed, would act as a bridge, allowing Samuel and his family to move on to the afterlife. The very next day, the Carters planted a sturdy oak sapling in the heart of the field. That night, as midnight approached, the family gathered around the tree, holding hands and whispering words of comfort and release. As the clock struck 12, the familiar hum of machinery began. This time, the ghostly figures emerged from the corn. Drawn to the tree, one by one, they touched its trunk, their forms shimmering and dissolving into the night. The midnight harvest ceased from that day on. The oak tree grew tall and strong, its branches reaching out as if in gratitude. The Carters, forever changed by their ethereal encounter, became the guardians of the tree, sharing its story with every generation. The farmhouse, once a place of sorrow, became a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of understanding, compassion, and the enduring bond between the living and the dead. 5. The Eyes in the Corn. Clara, a young teacher in the town of Meadowridge, often took a shortcut through a sprawling cornfield on her way home. The path, worn down by the footsteps of many before her, was a serene escape from her bustling day. But one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, her tranquil journey took a sinister turn. The cornfield, usually alive with the sounds of nature, felt eerily silent. Clara felt a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, as if she was being watched. She quickened her pace, trying to shake off the unease. But then she saw them, pairs of glowing eyes, low to the ground, peering at her from between the cornstalks. Frozen in fear, Clara could hear soft growls, the rustling of the corn, and the unmistakable sound of movement. She realized, with a jolt of terror, that she was surrounded. Gathering her courage, she began to run, her heart pounding in her chest. The eyes followed, darting between the rows, always keeping pace. As Clara neared the edge of the field, a ghostly figure emerged, blocking her path. It was a large, spectral dog, its fur matted and eyes filled with an otherworldly glow. Clara, recalling a lullaby her grandmother used to sing about guardian spirits, began to hum the tune, her voice shaky but resolute. To her astonishment, the ghostly dog halted, its head tilting as if in recognition. The other eyes in the corn began to materialize into more spectral dogs, each one pausing to listen to Clara's song. As the final notes drifted into the night, the ghostly pack, led by the large dog, formed a protective circle around her. From the shadows, a malevolent spirit, angered by Clara's presence, lunged towards her, but the ghostly dogs, with a unified growl, drove the spirit away, defending the young woman they had once sought to frighten. As dawn's first light broke, the spectral dogs began to fade, their duty fulfilled. The large dog approached Clara, nuzzling her hand in gratitude, before vanishing into the morning mist. Shaken but unharmed, Clara made her way home, the haunting melody of her grandmother's lullaby still on her lips. Upon sharing her experience with the town's elders, Clara learned of the legend of the guardian dogs. Centuries ago, a pack of loyal dogs had protected the town's inhabitants from malevolent spirits. When they passed on, their spirits remained, forever guarding the land and its people. The cornfield, it turned out, was their resting place, and Clara's song, a tune from a time long past, had awakened their protective instincts. Grateful for their intervention and with a newfound respect for the legends of Ridge, Clara, with the town's support, erected a monument at the edge of the cornfield, honoring the guardian dogs and their eternal vigil. From that day on, residents and travelers alike would often stop by the monument, leaving tokens of appreciation and whispering words of thanks into the wind, hoping that the guardian dogs, wherever they were, could hear them. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the Dark Tales Unleashed channel for more such content.